Hi, everyone. I am here today with Evin O'Keefe, a good friend of mine who's also in Cork, but courtesy of COVID, we're actually sitting here in our little virtual spaces. And Evin has very kindly agreed to do the recipe for our Seasons Club. So every new season, Evin is going to also develop a recipe that goes along with the season. Now, Evin is also a very prolific writer, and she has done several books. A couple of them were Bake, Knit, Sew. She's got book one. I believe, Evin, is there book two as well? Or is that on the horizon?
It's coming up soon. Yes.
Yeah, and Ultraviolet Knits, and I believe there's 3 Islands as well. Now, if I've missed any, Evin can fill me in. And she's also, her blog, Evin O'Keefe, or Evin OK, is well worth a look with some guides to Cork City dining and recipes of her own. So welcome, Evin.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
What an introduction.
As I always find it a little disconcerting when people start introducing me. So this time with this particular club, we were developing something a little bit different because we were trying to go seasonally. And you immediately came to mind to be able to be our recipe developer because you have a lot of experience in it. So do you want us to tell us a little bit about, I suppose, the process of how you go about writing a recipe? Because it's something I've never done.
Well, I kind of fell into it. So I'm sure there is a completely appropriate way to develop recipes scientifically. But I fell into it back in 2004 when I was living in California, and a friend of a friend was running a newspaper and needed a recipe column, and the person fell through at the last minute. And I hadn't started blogging at that point, but she knew I baked all the time and would just come up with recipes. I think recipe development is a great fit for someone who doesn't like to follow other people's directions. And maybe that's how I fell into it. And so I started making just whatever. I focused on seasonal ingredients, local to where they were, which was in the Appalachian Mountains, which was fun. And then when that grew, I shifted and went into another magazine and then another publication. And then I thought blog, because that was a thing at that point. So when I actually develop a recipe, at this point, I accept that the person I'm making it for is going to be like me. They're going to have a fairly good variety of ingredients at hand. They're not going to necessarily want to go out and get one ingredient that they're only going to use the one time. They might be willing to for something super special, but I'm not going to say, oh, you need this particular type of vanilla bean that only grows in this country and is only available online from this store, because we have very busy lives these days, and it costs money as well for shipping.
Yeah, particularly culturally as well, because if you want it to be accessible more worldwide, you can't be too specific with the ingredients, I think.
Yes, and though, I mean, you can get more and more things, especially I'm finding here and other places, to put that requirement on people when they just want to enjoy themselves and make something nice. It takes out of it, and it puts pressure on them that does not add to the fun. So what's the point? So I love to kind of work with seasonal ingredients because they're more readily available and affordable. And I still remember one time when I was doing a recipe and I really wanted to do, and I was about to give birth to my first kid and all the nesting, and I really wanted to make an apple crumble, and I kept going around, and for some reason there was just a run on the apples that week. But the local shop, the owner had an orchard and he had spares, and he just big bag. And I think I ended up with about 5 crumbles from that. I always picture that as that is an acceptable ingredient right there. Yes. So I like to go with flavors that feel comforting.
Yeah.
And you know, if it's summer, I'm not going to go with something very heavy and hot. If it's winter, perhaps not a chilled item. But from that, I think also it's just what would go nicely with a cup of cocoa. You know?
Yeah. As everyone can probably hear, Evin is not native of Cork, but has been living here for many years. And so actually, Evin, when you moved from the US to Ireland, did you find the kind of things you were baking and the ingredients you were using, did they shift a lot? And like particularly, was there any big shifts or things that happened more slowly, maybe over time?
When I moved, my husband still reminds me of this. I packed canned cranberry and black beans in my luggage.
Actually, black beans are a good one because until the last couple of years, they were remarkably difficult to find in Ireland.
And now even now, there's a cycle where the shop will sell out of them, and then they have to wait for the next order. And Brexit did affect that a bit. So I might go 3 times a week and stock the black bean shelf at Mr. Bell's. I might. So there is a big shift with ingredients. I know because I live in the city, I've always had a little more choice because I can go to multiple stores in the span of an hour to get everything. But ultimately, that was before I had kids, that would not take an hour now.
No.
No. So there is definitely a shift in what's available. There are still things that are not available. Canned pumpkin is hard to get, but not a lot of people realize it's not even pumpkin.
I was going to say, what I have discovered is you can get frozen cubed pumpkin in the supermarket, which I think would actually, while it's not the same as canned pumpkin, it's probably more pumpkin-y. So
exactly, because you need to get the pie pumpkin for the flavor, and if you can't get a pie pumpkin, it's not worth it. So the frozen's a great tip. I end up using butternut squash sometimes if I'm in a pinch.
Yeah.
And I interchangeably use that for sweet potato and pumpkin.
Yeah.
And my kids do not know.
Yeah. And that's another thing that has also changed over the last several years. I think squash and pumpkins, well, pumpkins are still more just decorative here as opposed to actually being a food product, but there's a lot more squashes kind of becoming available and year round, you know? So I think in the last like 10 years, there's been a much more internationalization, I think, of what's available in Irish shops, more so than was before, I think, you know? So now I am going to ask you if you've got any hints for people who are either joined up for the Seasons Club or who are thinking about it as to what's going to be our first recipe without giving it all away to people.
Well, okay, so I won't say any of the ingredients because that would give it away. But I will say it's going to be a little healthy focused, but not too healthy. And it's going to go with coffee, tea, or hot chocolate. And it will be something you won't feel like. I try and restrict a lot of sugary things with my kids because the younger one can't tolerate it and literally bounces off the walls. And it won't be something you'll hesitate to share with your family.
Good. What I'm actually going to ask people to do is when the club has come out and people have received everything, I was going to have a Zoom launch and get people to actually make the cake beforehand, and we'll have like a cake testing at the Zoom launch, which I think will be a lot of fun, along with something perhaps that you can have with the cake that may or may not be with the no secrets being given away here, just lots of hints. Thank you so much, Evin, for joining me this morning. It was a pleasure talking with you and catching up with you again, because it has been a while. And yeah, thank you very much. And I hope you all enjoyed the chat with Evin this morning.